I'm just going to talk a little bit about sewing these two little tail pieces together. So I have my two halves and these two very long tails. I don't usually crochet something that hangs off so much, but the tail, I mean, stingrays really have this long tail. So what I advise doing is using some stitch markers. That's like the word of the day, isn't it? Use some stitch markers to pin these together. So tails curl. That's because the foundation row that's made up of chains is always very slightly smaller than a single crochet row. So one way to fix this is to use a larger hook when you're doing the chains. So on Afghans, that's really common advice because you have 200 stitches, something like that, and you don't want a crinkly, curly edge. For something that's this small, it was 23 stitches. It's not really going to make a big difference, and the two are going to kind of balance themselves out as we sew them together. So I don't worry about switching hooks for those, 23 stitches. I just use some stitch markers to pin them together. So what we're going to do is the same we always do, is whip stitch, and we're picking one stitch here and the analogous stitch here as we do our whip stitching. Now you'll notice as you go around, you will have a very, very narrow tube. And so you could put a pipe cleaner in there if you'd like. So once you sew up the sides from the inside, you could insert a pipe cleaner. And I do advise you to sort of be careful when you're planning on what you would do with that. So a pipe cleaner, because it's pointy, it could come through the fabric. So you wouldn't want to give it to a very small child, but you could insert a pipe cleaner, and then this is like classic stingray look, having a little bend in there. That bend will be a lot easier to accomplish. So that's one little tip that I hope you enjoy. Using pipe cleaners, I think, is so much fun for antenna or things like that. If you are giving it to a small child and you didn't feel comfortable using the pipe cleaner, I think it's totally fine to just leave it as is. I mean, they have straight tails too sometimes. The other thing you can play around with, although I haven't tried it myself, would be to use some kind of a fabric stiffener. So obviously you want to check that it's not toxic, but you could just sort of stiffen it a little bit into a shape, and it might not hold up as well over time, but it gives you sort of the look you're going for a little while. Starch, like cornstarch, is non-toxic. So that's another idea that you could try. Another idea could be even to just assemble it and then tack it just to the edge of the body. And that could also make a loop that would be really fun and practical for hanging on to things if you want to have your stingray hanging around. So those are a few ideas for working with the tail. I hope you enjoy this guy.